Hello and welcome to Cole Red Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Cole Red. Thank you for joining me. Today's video is going to be a fusion planning video for Armanz the Magnificent's hybrid fusion event. It's been a little while since we've had a hybrid fusion, so we're going to cover all of the considerations that you need to know in order to improve your chances of success in bringing home what I think is an absolutely fantastic fusion champion. There's a lot to cover. We're going to move fairly quickly. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder, the whole month of March is Raid Madness month here on Cole Red Plays. We've got a great video series that's putting the top 64 epic champions into a bracket tournament, kind of March Madness style. We've had 4 great content creators come and join us to give you their analysis on those champions. And then you're going to get to not only create your own prediction bracket and match wits with the content creators, but you're going to get to vote on the champion matchups themselves and decide the outcome of the tournament. So if you haven't checked out that video series yet, there's a whole playlist on the main YouTube page. Go check that out. And don't forget to hit the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel to get notifications, and consider joining our Discord community. All right, now let's get to our plan. I want to start off by giving you my impressions of the epic champion involved in this hybrid fusion event. This is Kafru the Deathkeeper. He is a void epic. And for some players, this may be the top prize in this fusion. Not because Armanz isn't great, but maybe you are early game or you don't have the resources right now to go for another big fusion. And so you might be able to get 1 or 2 copies of Kafru. And I think you should consider that because he's a very interesting epic. You can see he's a defensive-based champion. His stats are fairly solid. He's tanky, not super tanky, but certainly tanky enough to fulfill his role. And now let's take a look at his hit. So his A1 has a 70% chance when booked of transferring 1 random debuff from this champion to the target. That's nice. Allows you to kind of get those debuffs back onto the enemy. Could be especially helpful for bombs. The A2, however, is a very good skill. You can see this books down to a 3-turn cooldown. It attacks all enemies, and before attacking, removes 1 random debuff from all allies. So it's a mini cleanse, a 1 debuff cleanse. And then the damage increases by 5% for each debuff removed. That'd be 5% for each champion. Also heals each ally by 10% of this champion's max HP if a debuff was removed from them. So it's a heal, a mini cleanse, a little bit of an AoE, which might hit decently hard. This is a cool all-around skill. I think it's definitely an epic version of this type of skill. Very useful, very helpful in a lot of places, but not OP by any means. The A3, however, this is a really interesting skill. This places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn and a taunt buff on them for 2 turns. Now, taunt is a skill that was introduced last year into the game and hasn't really come into its own yet because there aren't that many champions that have taunt. And in fact, it may be that taunt is so powerful that we never get a lot of champions that have this skill. But this is really interesting because I think that this is going to allow Kafru the Deathkeeper to slot into unkillable clan boss compositions as a stun target. Now, I'm fairly certain that taunt actually works against clan boss. I'll have to double check that. If you know, let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong about that. But what this means is you have a stun target who can also potentially be a cleanser. Now, I suspect just from looking at these skills that in order for Kafru to be a cleanser and your stun target, you're going to need to book Kafru's command down to just 4 turns. You're going to have to hold a book out of this skill because the unkillable buff is on a 4-turn cooldown. You're going to have to match these turns up because he's going to have to run at a 4-to-3 ratio, and that will just make it easier for speed tuning. In addition, he decreases the damage all allies receive by 10%, and he pulls that onto himself instead. So even if you're not using him in an unkillable comp, he still provides a lot of extra mitigation to your team. So like I said, a pretty solid tank. I think he's an interesting champion, and people are going to be theory crafting with this guy in a lot of compositions. So if you can get a copy of this champion, because you're probably going to want him somewhere down the line. Okay, now let's take a look at the legendary. This is Armanz the Magnificent in the Barbarians faction. A little bit funny that he's a pirate in the Barbarians faction. We know who he looks like. We know who he's supposed to be. But he's got a fantastic kit. You can see his base stats are solid. He is a support champion, so he's got a decent attack and defense level for a support champion. pretty good HP, really nice speed at 108. He's got some resistance, some accuracy in his kit. So not a damage dealer, but you're going to see from his kit, we don't care how hard he hits because he's going to be crazy good. His A1 has a 50% chance when booked of increasing the cooldown of a random active skill by 2 turns on one enemy. This also fills this champion's turn meter by 10% for each turn added to the cooldown. So potentially you could only add 1 turn to a cooldown if the cooldown only had 1 turn left on it, right? So it could be 10%, but in most cases, this will be 20% if the enemy has gone. And it won't be any turn meter if the enemy doesn't have any skills on cooldown. So it will be variable, a little bit harder to predict, and obviously not as useful against bosses that don't have a cooldown, like aren't susceptible to cooldown increases. But a very cool skill, great A1, very powerful. The A2 is an AoE on a 3-turn cooldown, and it steals the turn meter of each target, the entire turn meter of every target. This is crazy strong. Because isn't just a turn meter decrease, it's a steal. That means he's going to be going again over and over and over again. This is why everybody is talking about him as an arena god. And honestly, I got to say, I'm a little bit frustrated with this guy because he is a fusion. That means in a few weeks' time, he's going to be everywhere in arena. We went through the UDK meta. We went through, having Artak everywhere. We went through Ronda. We went through Wukong. And now we have to go through Armanz. Those were all free login champions. But this is almost as bad in this sense. But this is why you're going to want him. He's going to make Arena much, much easier for you when you're in Classic Arena on offense. But if you play Live Arena, expect to see a lot of Armanz the Magnificent. The A3 places a sheep debuff on an enemy for 1 turn. This debuff cannot be blocked. It can be resisted, but it can't be blocked. And it then has a 100% chance of removing all buffs from all enemies, and then fills this champion's turn meter by 5% for each buff removed. So he's got 2 skills that give him additional turn meter. He's got another skill that steals turn meter, and that's going to be big. He's going to get a lot of turns. He also has a speed aura in arena battles of 28%. That's the same as Wukong, and only 2% behind Arbiter. So absolutely fantastic speed lead as well if you don't have your Arbiter yet. And then finally, the passive, whenever a sheep debuff is removed or expires on an enemy, increases the cooldown of a random active skill on that enemy to its maximum. So you're going to sheep somebody for 2 turns, and then you slow them down, by the way. When they're sheep, they get slowed down to 150 speed, so if they're moving real fast, that doesn't happen when they're a sheep. And then even when they come back, they're going to have a lockout on a particular skill. Again, it fills this champion turn meter by 10% for each turn added to the cooldown. That could be more because some skills have 5-turn cooldowns even, so you could get 50% turn meter here. And if there are multiple champions, well, hopefully nobody's running multiple Armanzes, but could happen. Only one of these skills will activate. So absolute arena god. He's going to be very useful in wave content, like in upper levels of Doom Tower. You're going to want this guy. He's going to provide solutions for some of those harder floors. Absolute. I don't know that any champion is a must fuse, but I would say if you are worried about stretching for this guy, he's probably worth the stretch. He's worth the attempt. Don't go so far out on the limb that it's not only going to fail and you won't get this fusion, but you will also miss next month's fusion. Don't do that. But if you think, you've got a decent chance, but it's really going to take a lot of extra activity and really being focused, it might be worth that extra time in game this month. Okay, time to get to the fusion plan. Now, this is a little bit of a different calendar. We see that they brought the Hero's Path back into this event. At least they're telling us what kind of Hero's Path it is this time. You can see it's going to be another summon event plus soul stones, so shards and soul stones for the Hero's Path. So that means this event calendar has 3 shard events. Not great. I don't find that really friendly. And we just had a 2 times Sacred Shard event this past weekend. We just had a 2 times Soulstone event this past weekend. So it feels a bit unfriendly that they're going with this type of Hero's Path. So what I would highly recommend is, unless you were one of those players that just saved your shards this past weekend or save your souls this past weekend, you shouldn't bank too much on the Hero's Path. You might be able to pick up 25 fragments there, maybe with just some ancient shards or whatever you have. It's not going to be during a 2 times event or anything like that. It starts on a Monday. It ends on a Friday. So don't expect that to overlap with any other shard event that's going to be helpful. Maybe if we're lucky, we'll get a progressive event in there that might be worthwhile. Okay, so if we look down here at the fragment totals, you can see there are 400 total fragments, 200 from tournaments, 200 from events, and then 50 bonus fragments from that hero's path. So the good news is if you're perfect, you can do this entire fusion without going to the hero's path fragments. That would be optimal. However, you may have to plan for that 25, especially if you are short on either energy or silver, because that can be tricky. We do have 3 artifact enhancement events. We do have 2 full champion trainings. So this is back to sort of the classic standard fusion calendar that we've seen in months past. The last few have been a little bit more friendly than this. This is amping up the difficulty a little bit, back to what we were seeing probably at the end of 2023. Okay, so now let's look at the actual tournaments and events and talk about our plan. So the first thing that you'll notice is we've started off with a dragon tournament and a champion training event that for a full day, there's nothing else going on in the fusion event calendar. I recommend for today, at least just for the first 24 hours, you focus on the champion training tournament and ignore the dragon tournament. Now, usually we like to double dip with dragon and champion training. You can do dragon with food. It's probably the easiest dungeon to do with food, to clear it with either a solo champion or duo champion and throw 3 or 4 food champs in there. But in this particular case, you may want to hold off just a little bit. And the reason is because the Dungeon Divers event doesn't start until Saturday. So we have 2 days of the dragon tournament before we get to Dungeon Divers. And that is the more important double dip. So what I would say is for the first 2 days through Saturday, you probably just want to focus your regular energy and time into champion training. Get into your campaign. If you like to do champion training other places, that's fine. If you want to do some brew tricks or you want to work, through the tavern, you can do that. But I would hold off on the dragon tournament itself and double dipping until you get to that point. Once the dragon tournament hits right here, then you can start putting those food champions into your dragon tournament. You're only going to have 24 hours or so to clear that entire tournament inside the Dungeon Divers event. Now, the reason that's important is because each dungeon tournament takes about 2,000 energy, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, but estimate 2,000 energy. And remember, a Dungeon Divers event takes about 5,000 energy. So if you split these 2 events up, it goes to 7,000 energy total. But if you can fold that dragon tournament into the Dungeon Divers event, basically this becomes free. You don't have to worry about this at all because it's just part of the 5K that goes into the Dungeon Divers event. So you can save yourself 2,000 energy overall. Now, I want to remind everybody, because I've had comments on these videos in the past that indicate some confusion about the resource numbers that we're talking about. You do not have to have all of the resources saved at the start of the fusion event. This is just what you're going to need over the course of the event. Remember that this starts on March 7th and it ends on, looks like March 20th for the regular events, March 22nd for the Hero's Path. So from the 7th to the 20th, you're getting energy, you're getting silver, you're getting your daily quests and your advanced quests, you're getting your Doom Tower rewards, you're getting your login rewards. So you don't have to have everything saved right at the beginning of this event, but you do want to look forward, figure out how many resources you have saved and what you're likely to pull in based on your playtime and your play style. And so again, if we can save energy, we try to save energy. And this is one place where you can save 2,000 energy, which is a significant chunk of the energy for the fusion event. Okay, now the second thing that's going to happen is the Ice Golem tournament will start right as the Dragon tournament ends. And again, you're going to want to drop all 2,000 energy of the Ice Golem tournament into that Dungeon Divers. And if for the first day or so you can double dip with food in the Ice Golem dungeon, then that's even better. You can do some more champion training in Ice Golem, just like in Dragon. It's a little bit trickier with Ice Golem to get a solo champion, but maybe you can get a duo or even a trio that could clear the Ice Golem stage 20 for you, say, or wherever you're farming. That might allow you to get a little bit of free champion training in that first window. Don't forget to close out your champion training tournament on time. This is the one thing that can always be a little bit tricky. So you want to start that today and have it moving for the entire duration. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the classic arena takedowns. Here's one. We're not going to worry about this too much. If you are in Gold Arena at all and you are just doing your regular battles every day, these are probably the easiest events or tournaments in the entire Fusion event. So I rarely talk about these specifically, but if you are in low silver especially, make sure you're really active, you're refreshing frequently, don't spend gems, just refresh your arena every 15 minutes, get good fights, and make sure you're grinding away at these. They're still on the easier end, but if you are in silver and you're going for this fusion, you have to be active. You have to be active, and as long as you're active, you should be okay. When we're talking about the summon rush, I expect the same point totals that we've been seeing in recent events. So we're probably looking at 3,150 points for the 25 fragments. That is 6 sacred shards and 150 mystery shards, or some other combination that you prefer. Like I said, we just had a 2x sacred shard event. So if you are low on sacreds, you might have to use your ancients. I would hold on to your voids if you can. Don't use voids here if you don't have to. I would even use primals before I would use voids. That's just me as a free-to-play player. I know primals are also a rare resource. The great news is we do have a free reward from Plarium for the anniversary event that gives us, I think it's a shard of every kind. I think we're getting a shard of every kind. We're getting a sacred and a primal. I think we're getting all of them. So go and check that out. That will help a little bit in the summon rush. So if you have 6 sacred shards saved, that's probably the best use of those sacreds here. But if you'd rather hold on to those, you can certainly consider ancients. We do have a champion chase tournament in the second half. This starts on Friday. There will be a 2x event. I don't know what it's going to be because we had back-to-back 2x sacred events. Who knows what Plarium is up to these days? I would suspect it's a Void Shard event. That's what I'm thinking. We haven't had a Void Shard event in a while. So we had an Ancient, and then we had a Sacred, and then we had a Sacred. So I'm thinking Voids. Definitely hold on to your Voids for the Champion Chase tournament. Also remember that this is a hybrid fusion event. So if you can get all of these done, all of these tournaments and events done in the first half, when you get to this Champion Chase, you may actually be able to summon at least two of these Khafru, the Death Keepers, and it is a Void Epic. So that's 350 points for each epic that you can summon, and that's going to help you in this Champion Chase. I don't know if the Champion Chase points will be elevated because of the free fusions there, but you do want to save these fusions for that Champion Chase and any other fusions that you have. If you are close to a Doom Tower fragment champion, make sure that you collect those secret room fragments before the Champion Chase tournament. And if you have any past fusions or login fragment champions, hold those until the Champion Chase. That should help you alleviate the pressure on having more shards for this tournament. Also consider the permanent fusions, right? The Lady Mikage fusion, the Razin fusion, the Relic Keeper, any of those fusions might get you some points there. Now we have another Dungeon Divers event starting here. You can see that is on the very tail end of the Ice Golem. I'm not sure if they will overlap or not. It looks like they might a little bit if you're just looking at the visuals, but I honestly expect them to not overlap, which means you could hold off on this first day of Dungeon Divers and put this entire Fire Knight into that. That's going to be the 2K there. Again, that should be a free 2K, so we shouldn't have to worry about that, just like the Ice Golem and the Dragon. But this will be a 5K energy event, so you're going to have to spend some extra energy here, at least 3,000 energy that either weren't going into Fire Knight or that go into Fire Knight and keep pushing. Now remember, this is a Fire Knight tournament, so there will be a whole reward structure, and you can compete against other players for additional rewards. So it might be worth dropping the entire 5K in Fire Knight and Dungeon Divers and double dipping the whole thing. You can consider if that's what you want to do, or if you want to transition some of the energy into this champion training event. So you could do a lot of campaign within this Dungeon Divers event, and hopefully if you do enough of it, you'll be able to complete the champion training event and the Dungeon Divers event simultaneously as sort of a double/triple dip. Fire Knight is one of the hardest dungeons to get food champions into, but if you can get extra points that way, I would highly recommend it. Now, the Spider Tournament lines up with the last Dungeon Divers event here, so this full 2K is going to go into that Dungeon Divers event, so you don't have to spend any extra energy on any of the tournaments at all if you don't want to. but probably much like the Fire Knight tournament, you're probably going to spend the full 5K there in Spider. Again, it's a tournament, and Spider's going to get you cash, and you're going to need cash because we have a third artifact enhancement event, and each of these takes roughly 15 to 20 million. It can be worse. I've seen it go as high as 25 million for some players, but typically on average, I like to prepare with 20 million silver for each artifact enhancement events. And remember, we're going to need all three. We're going to need all three. So we're looking at 50 to 60 million, realistically, 50 to 60 million silver for the three artifact enhancement events. So that silver you're pulling from the tournaments is going to be important, especially if you haven't saved up a lot of silver. Don't forget that you can always forge gear in the forge if you have extra forge materials lying around and sell those for silver. So that's a way you can get some silver quickly. But otherwise, the tournaments are going to be your main source of silver. Okay, so that takes care of all of the events and tournaments. I do want to remind you that in order to complete this fusion, you must fuse Armanz before the end. The epics are fragments, but Armanz is a fusion. So if you have the epics and you don't, like if you have the epic fragments and you don't fuse them all and get them prepared, then you're not going to get Armanz. Now, if you're not going for Armanz, fine. Then you can hold on to the fragment champions as long as you want. But like I said, if you're going for Armanz, you want to fuse as many as you can inside of this champion chase tournament. Remember that you're going to need to get them to level 40, and then you're going to have to promote them to 5 stars and then get them to level 50. You're also going to need the potions. You're going to need the void potions, the affinity potions, to make sure that you can get them fully ascended. I would highly recommend doing that once you fuse them in the champion chase tournament. Try to do it maybe a little bit early in the tournament so you can actually farm up those Khafre the Deathkeeper champions in the champion training tournament and get as many points for those as possible. And you're going to want to do it quickly, right? Get those promotions as well. Now, as far as the hero's path is concerned, I don't think there's a lot to say about that other than if you are a spender and you want to buy some shards for it, you certainly could. I don't know that there's going to be any event there that's worthwhile. I also don't know that there's not. I suspect they'll probably do something. They'll probably do a progressive event there to entice people to spend on shards. But if you're a free-to-play player, you're probably out of shards by that point. Maybe you can pick up 25 fragments if you've missed something somewhere else. And if you know that that's possible, I would highly recommend skipping this artifact enhancement event, the third one. Either that or the champion training, because those are the ones that suck up all of your resources and put you in a bad spot for later on. Okay, so just one last thing to say here. Again, you can see there's a free gift in the shop. You want to pick it up today. Let's see, is it an anniversary pack? Raid anniversary? Where is it? There it is, 5th anniversary. You can see we're getting a shard of every type. In fact, we're getting 2 void shards and 3 ancient shards, plus an immortal soul stone. Hold on to that immortal soul stone for the hero's path event. You're going to need that to potentially go after at least 25 of those fragments there. And that's going to make it a little bit easier to complete this fusion event. I'm going to go ahead and claim this. It will probably be spread out over several days. It is, but it will be dropped in your mailbox. So you don't have to grab them right away if you don't want to. You can just leave them here in your mailbox so you don't get tempted to pull them in the portal if you don't need them for the summon rush. All right, that is it for this fusion plan. Let me know in the comments below if you are going for Armanz. Maybe you are going for just the epic. I'll be going for Armanz on my main account, and that's probably it. On my HH Challenge account, I'll probably be going for a copy of the epic instead. By the way, don't forget that because of the new fragment trading mechanic that's been introduced to the game with High Mother mod, if you can just pick up fragments here, even if you can't get the fusion, you may want to do that because that's going to allow you to trade those fragments in at a later date and progress towards your High Mother mod. So you also get other rewards there. So fragments are good. Fragments are good. Even if they're fragments for epics, they can be good. So consider that as well. All right. Thanks so much for hanging out. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.